Begin with the security situation in Burkina Faso, which has led the military government ordering French troops to leave the country within a month. The decision is the latest indication of deteriorating relations between France and its former colony following a second military coup in September last year. The military government has also suspended the 2018 military accord that allowed the presence of French troops in Burkina Faso.
Now, France's approximately 400 Special Forces soldiers stationed in Burkina Faso, which is currently battling groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The conflict in Burkina Faso, which has spread across the Sahel region from Mali over the past decade, has resulted in the deaths of thousands of civilians. There has been an increase in anti-French sentiment in the country, with perceptions that France's military presence has not improved the security situation. Last week, protesters in Burkina Faso took to the streets demanding the exit of the French ambassador. Let's have a listen.
Nous, on ne veut plus les aides. On veut qu'ils rentrent. On en a marre d'eux. On veut qu'ils rentrent. L'ambassadeur de la France, on veut qu'ils rentrent. Les ministères qui sont à Cambouessin, on veut qu'ils tous y rentrent. On va libérer le Burkina.
Nous sommes le Burkina Faso, c'est un pays indépendant. Le Burkina Faso, c'est un pays souverain. Nous avons décidé, nous voulons mener cette lutte-là. La guerre que nous menons présentement, le Burkina Faso a décidé de mener la lutte avec des bons partenaires. Et nous disons que la France n'est pas le partenaire idéal pour nous accompagner à la victoire finale.
D'ailleurs, le président lui-même a dit un jour que la France n'a pas d'intérêt, n'a pas d'amis, il n'a que des intérêts. Quand la France collabore avec un pays, ce n'est pas pour l'air, c'est pour leur intérêt.
Mais ça demande, et puis c'est l'ingrat. Quand tu vis dans un pays, le pays est en train de finir. C'est toi qui as les moyens pour l'aider, tu ne l'aides pas. Et tu dis qu'il faut rentrer.
And those were from residents in Burkina Faso saying they want to lead their fight. And now join us for this conversation, we have Dr. Lassane Ouderaogo, Research Fellow, Center for Democracy and Development, West Africa, Abuja, Nigeria. We also have Ovigwe Eguegu, Policy and Security Analyst at Development Reimagined. He joins us from Ankara, Turkey. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation. Now, Ovigwe, I'm going to start, and we want to know the reasons behind Burkina Faso's military government decision to order French troops to leave the country within a month. Did it actually come to you as a surprise? I mean, we saw situations happening in Mali also, and now Burkina Faso has joined the list. What exactly is going on?
Yeah, of course, this came as no surprise at all because there is a pattern here. If you recall, from about 2020, we started seeing these coups and not just even coups in Mali, for instance. There was a security partnership that the Malian junta signed with Russia, and then before you know it, there were calls for French troops to withdraw, and they did. The last group moved out. I think earlier in the year 2022, and then in December from Central African Republic, the last group of French soldiers also exited the country. So there is a pattern to this, and that's why what is going on right now for me, it's on one dimension. You could say yes, of course, there is dissatisfaction with the results on the ground after about a decade of French intervention across the Sahel. But beyond that, I think it's also important to mention that what we're seeing in West Africa now, or West Africa in general, it's a Franco-Russia proxy war.
Okay, Franco-Russia proxy war, I mean, Gbenga, looking at this relationship, what would you say to this?
Now, how has this relationship between France and its former colony, Burkina Faso, evolved since the second military coup in September 2020? And what's the current state of this relationship?
Well, from my perspective, I think see, when we had the first coup earlier in 2022, of course, there was the expression that Damiba would actually make some security changes, and that is why even the current head of the government now, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, was one of the main people who supported Colonel Damiba in the coup in 2022. But I think they started having divergence in terms of the approach to trying to solve the security problem, because Burkina Faso actually is facing a very dire security situation. I mean, about 40% of the country is not under the control of the army. So there is a sense of urgency that Ibrahim Traoré might have felt that Damiba had forgotten, which led to them overthrowing the government in the first place. So, of course, Ibrahim Traoré overthrew the Damiba, and immediately, even in the middle of the coup, we saw weapons flying, from Azerbaijan, I think, but yeah, Russian Ilyushev IL-76 planes, cargo planes, deliver weapons to Burkina Faso. And of course, from my perspective, I don't think those deals were actually for the coup, but maybe those deals were reached prior to the coup, but seeing the situation on the ground, they followed up with those deliveries, and even after the coup, there was another delivery in early October as well. So yes, of course, what I'm seeing is a preference for working with Russia with regards to the security situation in Burkina Faso, but it's also important to emphasize that the Burkinabe government, the government in Mali, Guinea, in CAR, you have to be very cautious, because when you're partnering with Russia in this global context, you have to be very, very careful, because there are certain powers who are not going to take this, sitting down.
Okay, later on we'll come closer more to understand this relationship between African countries and, of course, Russian mercenaries. But looking at this military accord, which began in 2018, what exactly was the impact? Because we see rising insecurity in Burkina Faso. Was there actually any improvement in it, or were the France military just there?
Of course, I think that is really where there's a lot of disappointment. Let's even go back a bit further. When Rochmark Kabore was elected to lead the country, I think in 2015, the situation in Burkina Faso was better off before him, and then after his election, it continued to decline, despite the fact that Burkina Faso was part of the G5 Sahel coalition. They were very much involved in the regional multilateral efforts to curb terrorism, but nothing seemed to work. And the criticism everyone had of G5 Sahel, apart from the fact that a major country like Nigeria wasn't involved, I mean, you can't be fighting terrorism in West Africa and not even involve Nigeria, for instance. But that aside, and if you look at the mechanism on how it was functioning, it was in many ways functional. There was issues around coordination among the militaries. There were issues around financing to get equipment and all of that. So even though the French were always insisting that this formula can actually work, it just didn't deliver the goods. And countries today are facing almost the same level of threat they were facing before Operation Saval came, that became Operation Barkhane. And Burkina Faso in particular is worse off today than it has ever been in its history. And it would be very naive to continue to defend a relationship, a security partnership rather, that doesn't provide the kind of deliverables that is stated in the mandate.
Now let's look at this French special forces and French presence in Burkina Faso. How many French special forces were stationed or are currently stationed in Burkina Faso? And what was the mandate and nature of their mission in the country? And do you think that the departure would affect the security architecture and the security of the Sahel and Burkina Faso going forward? Well, a negative effect on it.
Yeah, so we had 400, I think it was reported that they have 400 French special forces present in Burkina Faso, and we even way more outside of Burkina Faso, because Burkina Faso has been very reluctant to actually host foreign troops on its soil relative to other neighbors like Niger Republic and even Mali before Assimi Goïta took over. So one cannot even point to any real tangible, like sustained benefit of that deployment, and that is why there's so much frustration across the board. It is very hard to defend the fact that a major power like France, with all of its technological capabilities and equipment, and struggling against jihadis. Of course, we know this is not a conventional war. However, if you just cannot deliver, then you have to step aside.
Okay, thank you so much, Ovigwe. And of course, we'd like to bring in Dr. Lassane Ouderaogo. Now, Dr. Ouderaogo, we're looking at the relationship between Burkina Faso and France. And just earlier on today, we also saw a statement from France President Emmanuel Macron saying he wanted Burkina Faso to explain more about this withdrawal of its troops, because Burkina Faso is just giving the France government 1 month to leave Burkina Faso. Meanwhile, there was a reply from the Burkina Faso military spokesperson, which said that it wasn't cutting ties with Burkina Faso, and it would still also, with France rather, but it would still also require military equipment from France. So how do you see this playing out, Burkina Faso and France?
Well, I see this relation going from being really bad to getting worse in the coming months and perhaps in the coming year, in the sense that the bilateral relations between the two nations has gone really, really bad. Recently, we have seen the Burkinabe counterpart asking for the French ambassador to leave. We have seen that happening. We have seen the recent visit of the diplomat, the high-ranking diplomat of France to Burkina Faso, and he has been very, very clear that the French are in Burkina on the demand of the Burkinabe people, and if the Burkinabe government wants them gone today, they will be gone. And Burkina is just exercising its right to use a clause of the contract and asking France to leave, because it's, according to the government, it wants to assume its own right to take care of itself, because Burkina is in this dynamic of working towards securitizing the country by itself, recruiting a lot of volunteers. We have seen that recently. But moving forward, I do not see our relations getting better anytime soon. Perhaps when all of this plays out, then we will later on have a way of renegotiating better terms.
Thank you, Dr. Ouderaogo. Now, Ovigwe, can you explain can you provide more information on the role of Russia in the current situation in Burkina Faso and Mali, and how have this country's relationships with Russia evolved? We've seen Russian presence in the Central African Republic, and it seems that it has yielded some results. It's relatively more peaceful than it used to be before the Russians became involved. We've also seen a Russian presence in Mali. I wouldn't know if the situation has improved, but can you just paint a picture on the current situation of Russian mercenaries in Africa, and why is the West so averse to their presence?
Well, I think the situation in Central African Republic was...
Sorry, Dr. Ouderaogo, that question is directed to Ovigwe. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so the relationship between Russia and Central African Republic, I think, it has to be the most comprehensive, in the sense that it is, you would see, for instance, the security advisors, Russian security advisors working directly with the presidency. You will see Russian mercenaries providing direct personal security service to the presidency, along with troops from Rwanda as well. And of course, Russia played a role in reaching some form of peace agreement, which of course facilitated by the African Union. So I think sometime around 2018, 2019, if I'm not mistaken. So of course, they've tried to be more comprehensive in Central African Republic, and that's because they have almost 100% leeway to do whatever they want in the country. It's a very deep and to some extent a very, very strange relationship, But if you then look at Mali, it's a bit different. For Mali, what we have seen is supply of weapons, for instance. There are multiple reports of Russian mercenaries present physically in the soil of Mali, carrying out operations, supporting the Malian government and the military. But Burkina Faso is a bit new and it's a bit unclear. The most senior confirmation we've had, or most authoritative we've had, was when the President of Ghana, during the last US-Africa summit, came out to say Burkina Faso has actually employed the services of Wagner forces. And you might recall before that, the US Undersecretary Victor Nuland told West Africa was in Burkina Faso and actually reported that the government of Burkina Faso did promise that they would not employ the services of Wagner. So I think Burkina Faso is trying to be very, very cautious. They're not going all up overt like Mali, because of course they're very young government. I think the leader of the coup is very young. He's quite inexperienced in terms of governance, so he has to be very careful. Because, like you did mention, there is a lot of antagonism towards Russia. A lot of it justified. Before invasion of Ukraine, we can debate the motives, for that. But generally speaking, if we look at how the West Russia relationship has been in recent times, I think it's cause for caution, because we've seen a bill essentially pass through the U.S. House, HRO 7311. Where they are actually preparing a legislative framework that will be used to sanction countries that are maintaining relationship with Russia. It is because of that fact, for instance, that Algeria did not go on with a military drill it planned with Russia in November last. But not every country will be deterred. South Africa, for instance, is having drills with Russia next month. So, as speaking, the foreign minister of Russia is in South Africa, and Russia's engagement with Africa would definitely continue. Several countries that are ready to work with Russia, but I think these countries have to be very cautious, because we're at a point where there is so much effort to isolate Russia, and African countries are risk being caught, in the crosshairs, and it might be very devastating, for them if they don't play this game very, very shrewd manner.
Thank you so much, Ovigwe. Now, Dr. Ouderaogo, I'm still looking at this issue now with Russia and Burkina Faso. There's sanctions on Russia. We also see the French President Emmanuel Macron calling Russia's mercenaries a predatory influence on the African soil. Now, there are also allegations of human rights abuses by Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group in Mali and also other parts of Africa. I mean, what has been the official stance of the Russian government to all these allegations and sanctions?
Well, the good news is that in Burkina Faso, we're not talking of officially, there's no Russian operatives in Burkina Faso for the moment. And hopefully, in the coming months, we will not see Russians operating in Burkina. What the government has stressed so far, and even civil society organizations have been clear that they want the government to diversify its military partners and its different partners in this fight against terrorism. But it has not explicitly demanded the government to sign any contract with the Russian mercenaries. And the government itself has been explicit in explaining that all what they need from the bilateral partners is assistance, material assistance in terms of weapons.
Well, Dr. Ouderaogo, I want to ask this question. Sorry for butting in. The military government in Burkina Faso, can they handle the insecurity situations going on presently? Because we see lots of Burkina saying they want to handle the situation by themselves. Can the security apparatus Burkina Faso handle insecurity going on presently?
Nobody can really handle this security situation alone. That's why we're hoping that there will be more regional collaboration. And unfortunately, the Accra initiative did not go well, and the fiasco that the president of Ghana had assumed when visiting the USA has come to further deteriorate any hope of establishing trust between the two nations in terms of coming together and centralizing, coalescing our energies and our intelligence to fight together against these insurgencies. But what is clear is that today, no single nation in the Sahel is going to be able to tackle this jihadism alone. That is why we are also seeing a closer between Burkina Faso and Mali, and to some extent Guinea getting closer and closer to one another. and now expanding beyond the traditional partners and demanding for assistance in terms of weapons. But what is clear is that Burkina alone cannot go and fight and win this war. And I believe that the authorities are quite aware of that. The only problem is that they find themselves in a complex quagmire whereby you now see military playing politics. Damiba has spent 8 months thinking that to fight against this jihadism, you have to resolve the internal politics first. You need to reconcile career politicians, you need to do this and that, and Burkinabés are not patient in waiting for that. They want to see the problem resolved now, and they want to see it resolved just right away. So, and that's one of the challenges that President Traore is going to face, probably because people want to see the result right away, and they want to also. And one of the things that is going on is also this perception that our traditional partners have not been playing fair game in assisting us properly in providing the right equipment, in providing the right intelligence, and for a matter of fact, the presence of 400 military uniformed men. France military in Burkina Faso has not been reflected. That's a popular belief in Burkina, that the presence of the French has not reflected positively in the fight against jihadism in the country. Therefore, we don't need them to be here because their presence is actually a hindrance.
Okay.
The military need to be reconstructed. We need to be able to control intelligence. We need to be able to take care of everything by ourselves. And if France wants to support us in this dynamic, France should perhaps provide us with equipment. France should provide us with weapons. I've seen comparisons between the conflict in the Sahel and the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Why are the Western nations providing weapons and assistance to Ukraine and not doing the same way for us? And when you see those kind of comparisons thrown out in the mix, and you have military leaders in charge, then it's a recipe for new transformations. So,
Okay.
That's what we have to do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lassane Ouderaogo and Ovigwe Eguegu. It was a pleasure having you both join us on the conversation to analyze this. We will definitely keep our tabs on this fast developing situation in Burkina Faso. Thanks for your time again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.